Assalamu alaikum, and welcome to another segment of Youth Perspectives, where we address relevant issues that pertain to the youth of America today. So today we're going to talk about procrastination, because I believe it is something that a lot of students struggle with. If you're in high school, if you're in college or university, or even if you're just someone who graduated, if you have a job, or just there's so many things in life where we can procrastinate. And I believe that it's such a big enough issue that it actually affects a lot of our lives, and I feel like it needs to be addressed, and we can talk about ways to really fix this issue and to really start prioritizing the right things in our life, because I've seen so many people procrastinate, and even in my own life it is an issue sometimes. So I believe that today we should address that, so we can, kind of discuss some tips and tricks on how to prioritize and live a more successful and more useful and beneficial life, inshallah. But before we do that, I want to finish off the topic of parents. If you have been with us for the past two sessions, you've realized that we have been discussing parents, and this is the most extensive topic that we have covered so far in all the segments that we've ever done, because parents are such a relevant issue. All of us have parents, or we were raised by someone, and we covered parents for the past two segments. So today what I'm going to do is I'm going to just wrap up the topic, and then we're going to move on to talk about procrastination. So just to wrap, for those of you who weren't able to listen to the last two segments, I'll just summarize in a few seconds. We basically addressed the rights that parents have, and we talked about how important parents are in Islam, how much respect they deserve, what rights they have, and why we should fulfill their rights. And we talked about the punishments of not fulfilling their rights. We talked about the punishments of not respecting them or not treating them the way that they deserve. And we also talked about the many benefits of treating your parents the right way. And we discussed hadiths, we discussed Quranic verses and stories to back all those points of the topic. It was very extensive. We spent two whole segments covering that. And today we're just going to wrap it up by addressing some present day issues on that topic. So we spent the past two segments talking about the Islamic perspective, like hadiths and Quranic verses, but today we're going to talk about just in the current day and age, in this society, in this time, why is this an issue? So I just wanted to address the topic of non-Muslims. So let's look at non-Muslims and see how they really treat their parents compared to how we are supposed to treat our parents in Islam. So just to start off, I want to explain that America and a lot of Western or European countries have this individualistic culture, right? It's all about me, it's my life, it's my success, my choices, my opinions, my things. So I believe that in America growing up, that we have been fed this culture of like independence and individuality, which is really great to some extent, because we have more forms of like self-expression. We get to we have the freedom of speech. We have so many rights in this country as well, because this country prizes the individual. But I believe in that quest for like freedom and individuality, we often forget that family is very important as well, and sometimes interdependence is as important, or if not even more important than independence to some extent. So for this country, a lot of times you see that as soon as people become 18, or they move out for college, or even if they're in the same city, right? If pretend like if someone is in the same city as their parents, they still move out of the house once they reach a certain age, because it's considered socially unacceptable in this society, apparently, if you stay with your parents past a certain age, because if you do that, then people will shun you. They'll think that, oh my God, you're not independent, you're not responsible, you're immature. And you see a lot of times in like books, movies, in the media, you see people kind of make fun of others who stay with their parents. People who live with their parents in this country, they're kind of looked down upon if they're a little bit older and they still live with their parents. And I just feel like that's really wrong, because I do understand that sometimes when people live with their parents, it is because they don't have the responsibility or the maturity to stay up on their own feet and be like financially independent and stuff like that. Sometimes they are immature. Like if you're 35 and you don't have a job and you're still relying on your parents' income, then that is an issue. especially if you have like a family of your own that you have to take care of. But I just believe that if there are so many people who are responsible, they are independent and mature to some extent, and they still care about their parents, and that's why they stay with them, I believe that they shouldn't be looked down upon. So that's just something that I noticed, this trend in this country, is that, oh, if you live with your parents, even when you're in college, you're immature, or you don't have it in you to be an adult yet. So apparently a lot of people, and I asked a lot of my American friends, what do you consider the transition to adulthood to be like, right? So at what point in your life do you consider yourself to be an adult? And they said, oh, the moment I move out of my parents' house, that's when I'm officially an adult. And I told myself, that's not a really correct way to really measure how you're an adult or not. But unfortunately, that's how it is in this country. But if we move on to like the Asian cultures, or even like move on to the African cultures, or even sometimes the some European cultures as well, and other parts of the world, being with parents is such an important thing, because family ties are so important. So even if the adults, they live in many joint families, they always look out for each other. They're constantly caring for each other, and you notice that even when parents are getting older, their children are taking care of those adults till the end of their life. And that's, I believe, a very beautiful way to look at the concept of family. And that's how Islam really supports the concept of family as well, that we should always look after each other and care for each other, and we shouldn't just break off ties and leave. Obviously, it's okay if you move out, but don't completely cut off yourself from your parents. I've heard stories where children don't really talk to their parents, they don't visit their parents much, they don't maintain ties with their families. I know siblings, sometimes in American culture you hear of siblings who haven't spoken for 10 years, or people who like mothers and daughters who don't get along, and the daughters actually don't even like their parents. Like they say, oh my god, my mom gets on my nerves, and the daughter doesn't even like her mother. And that's just, I found that to be like very upsetting. And Islam is completely against that. Islam promotes, to maintain family relationships, to respect your parents. And we discussed the Islamic rights in the past 2 segments. But today I just wanted to mention as well the question of, do we think the youth of today fulfill the rights of their parents by respecting and obeying them? And just honestly, I don't think that the youth do that as much, because since this society is so much about like individuality, and we oftentimes think that parents get in the way of that. So if we have our own opinions, if we have our own ideas and interests, and if we have our own talents and things like that, sometimes we think that our parents kind of put like their opinions and their desires over our heads, and we kind of have to fulfill all their expectations. And it does become hard, especially if your parents came from a different culture. Like for example, like my parents are from India. So if your parents are from anywhere, and if your parents weren't born and raised in American culture, it becomes harder, because they come from this like rich background of like all these different cultural expectations. The way they grew up, the way their parents raised them was so much different compared to how we are raised today in this country. So like they come to this country raising you, and the only information they have is how they were raised back home. So it's kind of they're learning as we are learning as well, how to navigate in this new country. They're learning that as well, because they have to balance both cultures. They came from this culture, now they have to really learn about this new culture. So it's harder for them, and they are trying their best to raise us in the right way. But sometimes we do children and parents do clash in their opinions and their interests, because these American children, they've grown up in this country their whole life. That's the only life they know. And some values in this country are completely opposite, completely opposing to the values that these parents were taught in their background cultures. So I believe there's a lot of issues that happen, especially with our generation, because we are the first generation where almost all of us are raised in a different country than our parents. Because back in the day, that wasn't an issue. Our parents and our grandparents and their great-grandparents, they were all raised in the same country. So they kind of knew what was going on. But we're the first generation where our parents have moved, and now it's this new country, new values, new ideals, this whole new, everything's new. So it's very, very different. And I believe that we should cut our parents some slack. They are trying their best. And I believe that our parents previous generation is doing a fantastic job of raising us, not only in this American culture, not only with whatever culture they came from, but with an Islamic culture as well, right? To raise us with the proper Islamic values, because it is very hard. And I mentioned this 2 sessions ago, I believe. The first session that we did talk about parents, we talked about how big this is. Like, do we not realize what difficult task this is for parents, that they are raising you in this new culture with values that are completely opposing to their background culture, but they're also trying to raise you with their home culture. So the food, the clothes, the language, some cultural ideals, they're trying to raise you with that as well. So this hybrid life, right, of America and back home. And on top of that, they are raising you as Muslims, right? They're taking you to the masjid, they're putting you in Islamic schools or Sunday school or Quran lessons, or they're teaching you how to read Quran or how to pray, and so many things like that. They're telling you stories of the prophets and things like that. They're raising you in this Islamic culture. They're teaching you the love of the Ahlul Bayt, right? They're taking you to majlises and jashns and things like that to celebrate the happiness and the sadness of the Ahlul Bayt. And they're teaching you about the stories of the prophets and the rules of Islam and about Allah and loving Allah and obeying Allah. And it's so hard for parents to do all 3 at the same time. So you have the background culture, you have the American culture, you have the Islamic culture, and then on top of that, they have to make sure that you're financially taken care of, you're given proper provisions, food, shelter, clothes, that you have a really nice social life, that you're taken care of, that they're trying their best to understand you. So I believe that we're so busy caring about our own opinion that we forget to put ourselves in other people's shoes. And that's the one thing I don't really like about American culture, because we're so focused on individuality that we forget that sometimes we have to be sympathetic and empathetic and look at other people and notice that they have lives too, they have opinions too, and they're just trying their best as well, and that they are individuals as well, and we should consider them and take them into account, take their feelings, take their views and their opinions into account as well, and take their perspective and mindset into account as well, because we have no idea what other people are going through, what background they come from, what intentions they have. So I believe in this culture it's important to be independent, to have individuality, whatever that means, but to also notice that interdependence, right? Interdependence is important as well. So that's just something that I wanted to address, that even if you grow up in this culture, just know that it's okay to care about your own opinions and to be your own person, but never forget that we're stronger together. So that's just something that I wanted to point out, because I feel I see a lot of people my age, their parents aren't as involved in their lives. My friends, a lot of them, or a lot of my classmates, they're just busy with their friends, their lives, and their parents don't really know what's going on, or they don't really see eye to eye, and there's a lot of disrespect going on. So that's just something that I wanted to mention, that even if your parents don't necessarily understand everything that you're going through, and if you're a little upset and irritated that they're not understanding where you're coming from, just cut them some slack, because they are trying their very best and they have done so much for you, and the least they deserve is for you to respect them and to listen to them, because they have the best intentions for you. They care about nothing but your happiness and your well-being. So parents are the purest of people, because out of everyone in the world, they have the best intentions for you, even if all the time you may not realize it, even if sometimes you get annoyed. Just know that regardless of their expectations or whatever they have towards you, they just want what's best for you. So you have to respect them, and you have to love them and really treat them the right way, because they've spent years and years and years raising you and sacrificing their own happiness and their own well-being, and they prioritized you for your entire childhood. So you at least deserve to put them first as well, and to respect them before you respect your friends, before you respect anyone else. Your parents come first. So that's just something that I wanted to address. And inshallah, we will take, the necessary steps to really start respecting our parents more. And inshallah, you can watch the previous 2 sessions. We explained exactly what the rights of the parents are, how we're supposed to treat them, and things like that. I also want to address the certain cultures, right? So we have the Asian cultures, where most of our parents came from, if your parents came from them, and then we have the American cultures. So the thing is, this is obviously, we're Muslims, and our first identity is our Islamic identity. So we shouldn't care about American culture, Pakistani, Indian culture, Arab culture, Persian. We shouldn't care about all these things. We have to care about what does Islam say first, right? Oftentimes we get so busy in this battle of what culture to follow that we forget that the first and foremost, most important thing is, what does Islam say? The Islamic perspective on the matter, right? So Islamically, we're going to compare with how does Islam really stand in terms of the Eastern cultures and the Western cultures, right? So Islamically, I'm going to give the example of me like being Indian, because that's just like the best example I can give, because I know the most about Indian culture compared to all the other cultures. But Islamically, in Indian culture, in terms of parents, we see that joint families are very, very, very promoted. And Islam doesn't necessarily promote like, everyone always has to live together for the rest of their life, right? Islam doesn't necessarily say that, but Islam definitely says that family is important, that you have to, call them, and not call them, but like, maintain contact with them, communicate with them, visit them, gift them, care about them, ask them how they're doing. You have to maintain these relationships and these ties with your family members, and of course your parents, above all your other relatives. So just culturally, I see that like in Indian culture, that's something that I really value, because that in Indian culture you see that even if children are old and they've grown up and they have families of their own, like spouses and children, they still, even if they don't live with their parents, they still go back and they make sure their parents are doing well. If their parents are sick, they take care of them. If their parents need financial help or medical attention, their children are there for them to help their parents in every need, because their parents spent so much time raising them, and now since their parents are older and their parents need help, the children are always there for their parents. And everyone just lives, together, even if it's not physically together in a house, they live together, meaning they maintain ties with their family. They call up their mothers or their fathers, their siblings, they have, family gatherings. Even if they live in different, cities or countries, they still make sure that they are still taking care of their family, that they're still really involved in their family's lives. So that's what I love about culture, and you see this not only in Indian culture, but so many cultures as well, where family is so important, and that you staying close and maintaining relationships with your parents is so important. So that's something that I like. That's something that I believe that Islam also recommends, to obviously, maintain ties with your family, to make sure that you're involved in their life. And then from the American perspective, I know I've been kind of like bashing American culture and saying that it's not that great, but what I do like about American culture is that parents are very, very loving towards their children, and they openly show their children how much they love their children. So sometimes culturally, and you see this like if you watch like movies of like, parents back home, parents are very, very strict. They make sure their authority is known in the house. They may physically reprimand their child. They don't really show that much love in the way that children maybe want to see it. So the parents are very strict. They always, they always like throw all their heavy expectations on their children. They don't really praise their children much, but they do complain about their children. Whenever their children do something bad, the parents maybe say, "Oh, I can't believe you did this," and they make the child feel bad for doing those bad things. But whenever the child does something good, the parents don't really, positively reinforce their children. So that's something that like the Eastern cultures kind of do. But in American culture, the Americans are very, very encouraging. They're very nurturing towards their children. They spend time with them. They play with them. They read books with them. They take them, places. And they're very loving, and they tell their kids, I love you, and they hug and kiss their children. And that's something that Islam obviously promotes as well, to be loving towards your children and to show your children that you love them, And so that's something that I wanted to mention, that both cultures is like, like back home cultures and current cultures have something that's very, very interesting, because both cultures have aspects that can be incorporated into the Islamic perspective of parenting and of families. So, do be involved in your family's lives and, love them and care for them, like the Eastern cultures teach us, but also like the Western cultures teach us, be very loving and openly show your family that you care about them, because sometimes small words of encouragement and small loving gestures can go a very long way. So that's just something that I wanted to address. And lastly, I just wanted to say, what can we do to start treating our parents better? And we discussed this in the past 2 sessions as well, but just to wrap up this topic, just say that educate yourself on the Islamic perspective of parenthood. That's the best thing you can do. Once you know like the Islamic perspective and what Islam says, what are your parents' rights, how you're supposed to treat them, then you can properly, change your ways of life accordingly. If you feel like you're not treating your parents the right way, then that's very important to self-reflect. So that's the most important thing. So once you have an understanding of what Islam is telling you to do, and what the rights are, what the benefits are for treating your parents correctly, what the punishments are for not treating your parents correctly, and how you're supposed to treat them. Once you have that in mind, apply that to your own life and see, okay, where can I improve? What am I doing that's good? And then keep doing that. And what are things that I'm not doing, and how can I change that? so I can become a better child for my parents, right? And we addressed in the previous session, even if your parents are, they have passed away, even if they're alive, even if you live with them or not, there are so many ways that you can help your parents, even if they've passed away. I addressed this for a while in the past session. You can do dua for them, make up their khaza, rozas, and their fasts and their prayers, do hajj on their behalf, give charity on their behalf. There's so many things you can do for your parents. Repay their debts, you fulfill their last will and testament. There's so many things you can do. You can even pay people to do that for your parents, and the thawab will go not only to you but to your parents as well. And you can do that for your parents whether they're alive or not. Either way, the blessings will double, one for you doing it, and the one for your parents doing the blessings will go to your parents. So that's the second thing, right? So first thing is to identify the Islamic perspective. Second is to really focus on how am I, in terms of what Islam is telling me to do. And then third is to just appreciate your parents. Just think about all the things that they've done for you, because oftentimes we focus on ourselves only and we forget all the things our parents have done for us. We maybe sometimes focus on the differences that we have, the differences in opinion, the fact that they have expectations, this and that, and we focus on the negatives, but we have to realize our parents do so much for us and they love us so very much. So we have to really think about that as well, and maybe make a list in your head of all the things they've done for you and all the things they're continuing to do for you. And then they never ask for favors in return, right? They never say, oh, you have to pay for all my things, right? They're just doing all these things because they love you. So this is something that we have to understand. And I think that's just what I wanted to say to end this discussion. And I just found it interesting how a lot of Americans, they just put their parents in nursing homes. And I've seen parents and old people in nursing homes. They're old, they need help, they need financial help, medical help, they just need this emotional support, and their children aren't even there for them. Their children are busy living their lives, and their parents have spent their whole life raising these kids, and now these kids just place their parents in nursing homes and forget about their parents, while their parents just almost rot away, and they become old and then they pass away. So I just feel like that's really, really terrible. Definitely make sure your parents are well taken care of, and that you are fulfilling their rights and you are respecting them, because they have done everything for you. So I think this is it to wrap up this topic of parenthood, because this is such an extensive topic and we could go on and on and on to talk about it. But I do want to address the issue of procrastination, because that's going to be the other topic of today. And the reason I am addressing the topic of procrastination is because I've seen in my life, and I've seen my friends, even my relatives, my family members, my classmates, I've seen a lot of people put off things that they're supposed to do first, and they start doing things that aren't even that important on the list. So for those of you who for some reason don't know what procrastination means, I can assure you, you are at least at some point in your life guilty of doing this. So procrastination is basically when you put off something that is important because you are doing something irrelevant instead. So pretend you have a huge essay due tomorrow, and or pretend you have a huge essay due next week. And you're like, oh my God, I have so much time, I'll put it off, I'll do it later. And you do all these other things that aren't even as important as that essay. You're watching TV, you're going out with your friends, you're on your phone, you're doing this, you're doing that, you're doing so many other things, and you're not focusing on the thing that's most important. So the time keeps rolling by, and it's the night before the essay is due, and you're frantically writing things, and it affects the quality of your work. It affects your emotional health, because you'll always be in this state of stress. And then at the end of the day, you just keep repeating this cycle, and you always have this cycle of putting off things until the very last minute, and then you just stress, and then somehow you get it done in time, and then you repeat and you keep doing it, and that's just the trend of our lives. So I believe that's very, very bad. For example, some things that people procrastinate on. You can procrastinate on so many things. It's not just limited to academic things, not just essays, homeworks, studying for exams. It's not stuff like that, but it's also for example, at work, if you have a meeting, or if you have to turn in some spreadsheet, or if you told someone you're going to do something, right? If you said, oh, okay, I'll get that in for you, or oh, I'll help you with this, or oh, I'll come visit you one day to drop this thing off, or I have to do groceries or errands, or I have to go to the bank or change the tires, or clean the cars. There's so many things, right? And we procrastinate on those things because we don't think those things are fun. We don't want to do them. We don't want to think about them. So we just put them off until the last minute. Also, from an Islamic perspective, I think one thing that we all procrastinate on, at least now and then, is namaz. And we've discussed this in previous sessions how namaz is so important, but when fazilat time comes, we procrastinate. We say, oh, namaz is in this time frame of a few hours, I can pray whenever I want. So you just put it off and you pray at the last minute, or you pray when fazilat time is over, and that's really not good, because if you have the time and if you're free to pray on fazilat time, why would you not? Right? Like, I understand if you're like at work, or if you're like in the middle of a meeting or class and you cannot pray exactly on fazilat time, but most of the time we have the privilege of doing so. We can pray as soon as the namaz time comes. We can stop what we're doing, close the TV, or end the call, or take a break for studying, or do whatever, and we could just do namaz on time, what we don't do. So that's something that I've seen a lot of people do, is that we procrastinate on namaz as well, which is something that definitely is not correct. The list goes on and on. You know yourself in your life, what things you're putting off, what things you aren't prioritizing. So I can't speak for you, only you can, and only you know what's going on in your life. But I'm just giving some examples from what I've seen in other people's lives, including my own. So the question is, why do people have the tendency to procrastinate? This is a very interesting question, because people can procrastinate for so many reasons, but I believe the underlying reason is the same, and it is because we just don't want to do things that aren't enjoyable. We want to put things off because we don't want to do them. So that becomes very, very sad, because if we do that, we constantly train our mind to only focus on things that we think are fun, and a lot of things in life that we have to do aren't necessarily fun, right? So for example, going and doing your essay, it's not like the most fun thing you'd ever do, right? It's not like you look forward to doing your homework. It's not like most of us don't look forward to doing namaz, although we should as Muslims. If we understand the value and importance of namaz, if we understand the benefits of namaz, we should look forward to it, but a lot of us don't. We don't look forward to reading the Quran. We don't look forward to doing the tasks that we have to do, and we just focus on these temporary satisfaction things, right? Like watching TV, or being on our phone, or playing games, or being with friends, or hanging out, or doing things that temporarily we think is enjoyable. Or sometimes we'll mix up our priorities and we'll do two things that are important, but we'll put them in the wrong order. So you're studying for a very important exam, which is important, but it's also namaz time, which is even more important. So you have to really be able to prioritize and notice, okay, what things are at the top of the list, and then what things are less and less important at the bottom of the list. So once you kind of really make a list of what things are on the top of the list, what things do you have to kind of tackle first, then you can be better able to kind of cross those things off the list and get all these tasks done and check them off one by one, and you'll be much happier. And I'll explain that in a bit. What are the negative effects of procrastination? So first, I'll address this before we go on to what are some things we can do to not procrastinate. So the negative effects of procrastination. This list is very extensive, so I can't really list it all, but if you do that, you will constantly be at a standstill your whole life. You will keep yourself from succeeding in so many levels, because you will never ever in your life have a chance to get ahead. You will never have a chance to get ahead. You will lag behind, or you will barely make it. So if you have an essay due in a week, but you have this really big exam in the next week, and you have for example a project due the week after, if you procrastinate the entire first week, you're putting off your essay. You're putting off your essay the entire first week, and you're so stressed about that. Even if you're enjoying other things, at the back of your mind you have it, oh my god, my essay, it still has to be done. Then when the week comes to an end, you quickly finish your essay, and then you're relieved for maybe 2 seconds, and then you realize, oh my god, the next week I have a huge exam. So you put it off, and the whole week you're stressed about that, but for some reason you're still not studying, even though you're stressed about it. And then at the end you study and you somehow take the exam. I don't even know how you did. I don't even know. And then after that, maybe you'll have 2 more seconds of relief, and then you're like, oh my god, a project is due. And I'm not, when I say you, and I'm using second person, I'm referring to myself before anyone else, right? We all, even I, have been guilty of doing things like this as well, especially in the past when I didn't know how to prioritize my stuff. So procrastination is so bad because you're always jumping from one task to the next. You have no time to sit still and really relax, because even if you are watching TV or you're doing something that's fun, you're hanging out with your friends, you still have the burden of that task over your head, right? Like that burden on your shoulders, at the back of your mind, you know, oh my God, I still have that really important thing that I had to do and I still didn't do it. So even if you think you're enjoying yourself, you're just fooling yourself. At the back of your mind and your subconscious, something's bothering you, and you can never really truly be satisfied because you always have things to do. So that's just the biggest negative effect of procrastination. And then you won't have time to do other things in your life because you're so busy focusing on the big things that you still didn't do yet. So that's something that just is terrible, and you'll always struggle. Your life will be a constant battle of finishing one task after the next right before it's due. So just like procrastination is really, really terrible. And let's address some things that people can do to stop procrastinating. And there are so many things, and certain methods work for other people, certain methods don't work, you know. So you have to really, it's trial and error. So kind of using trial and error, see what works for you, see what doesn't work for you, see what is most beneficial for you in your life. And also depending on the tasks you have, right? If you're a student versus if you work, versus if you're just, even if you're like a stay-at-home mom and you have all these errands like doing laundry, grocery, whatever, or if you're a man, things, anything. If you have responsibilities, you know what method works best for you. But I will list some that I've seen to be beneficial in my life and other people's lives. So one is to stick to a routine. This is very, very important. And maybe we will spend a whole different segment addressing this, because staying on a routine, sticking to a routine is so, so important, because every single day, your life will be so organized, and that's so beautiful, right? Instead of waking up at whatever time and sleeping at whatever time and eating whenever and just doing things here and there with no like pattern whatsoever, no organization, then your life will just be so like chaotic and messy, right? So you should have some routine in your life. Maybe wake up at a certain time every single day. Maybe you could sleep in a little on the weekends, but on the weekdays, every single day, wake up at a certain time. Even if you don't have to get up early for school or work, just get up, right, and get your work done, and sleep at the same time every night. So many scientific studies have proven this. So many scientists, and like it's just this general knowledge. Sleeping at the same time is the best thing you can do for yourself, because your body will be accustomed to that sleep and wake cycle, and you will be so productive, because every single night you will sleep at the same time, meaning you will wake up at the same time as well, and then you can be better recharged for the day. So keep to a routine. Properly schedule your tasks. So if you have a test due in a week, say, okay, I'm going to break it up into chunks. I'm going to study one chapter today, one chapter tomorrow, or maybe one chapter these 2 days, one chapter the next 2 days, the third chapter the next 2 days, and then the last 2 days I will review everything, right? Break it down. If you have a big task to do, break it into smaller, like doable pieces, so it becomes less overwhelming, and then chip away at those little by little. So oftentimes we procrastinate because we have such a huge, like daunting task, and we get so overwhelmed, we get so scared of it because it looks so big. But if you sit down and you break it down and you realize, oh, hey, I can do these little things one by one, then that's much easier, right? So if you have this huge exam and you're so scared because you're like, oh my God, it's so big, I can't possibly study for it in time, break it down. So, okay, how many chapters does that exam cover? It covers 3 chapters. So, okay, can you do 1 chapter in these 2 days? Yeah, that's doable, right? Can you study the next chapter in the next 2 days? And things like that. Break it down. Even for like a project, right? Or for anything in life, just break it down if it's too big for you. And then also make a list of things that are like important, from like the most prioritized thing to the least prioritized thing, right? And then do the biggest thing first. Because if you spend all your time doing the little things, by the time you reach the big thing, you'll be so tired that you won't even do the big thing. So whatever is most important, tackle that first, and believe me, you will be so relieved. Because if you're doing all your little tasks, you'll still have it in your mind that, oh my God, I have to do that biggest task. It's still there at the end of the day for me. So, take care of the biggest thing first. And it's so beautiful, because if you take care of the biggest task, that means you just kind of, fulfilled, and you just crossed off the hardest part of your day. So you're done with the hardest part of your day, and everything you do after that, it will be easier. So isn't that like really awesome, that if you finish your hardest thing, everything else will be a breeze, because you already finished the hardest thing. Everything else is easy for you. But if you do small things, you'll become so tired, and you'll still have that on your head that I have to do that really hard thing at the end of the day, at the end of the week, at the end of the month. So tackle that first, right? or maybe at least if you're breaking that big thing down, tackle it and then tackle the small things at the same time, but make sure you start working on the big thing as soon as possible, because it's terrible if you have to do these really important things at the last minute. It'll affect the quality of your work. It'll affect your mental health, everything, right? Another thing you can do is have a planner. This is very wonderful. Have a planner, like your whole month or your whole week planned out. Write dates down, like, okay, this date I have a meeting, this date I have, this event, this date I have this project due, this date I have to, go early to work or go late to like school. This week I don't have class. Like, make a planner so that when you open your planner, you can just see in one glance, what do I have to do and when. It really helps when you have the idea of the bigger picture, because sometimes, for example, if you have a very easy week, if one week is very easy and you're relaxing, and then when that week is over, you realize the next week is so busy and you're so overwhelmed, you're going to become upset, because you're going to be like, oh my God, I could have used my free week to help take all the burden out from that busy week. So if you have a planner of the whole month, you can see, okay, this week I'm free, but the next 2 weeks I am very busy, so I should probably do some of those busy things in the week that I'm free to help myself in the next 2 weeks to come. And that's what I do myself as well. I keep a planner and I see, okay, which weeks are going to be terrible, which weeks am I like out of town. For example, I'm going out of town for a whole weekend, so that whole weekend I'm not going to get to do all my work, so I have to do all of that work before, the weekend before I leave. So the planner really helps you like organize your things. So, but if you're procrastinating, you're always going to struggle. So do things early, you cross it off, right? And then once you notice that you have a set time for all your things, you're gonna have so much free time. I'm telling you, you're gonna have so much free time to spend with your family, your friends, your own things. You can like do your hobbies, interests, whatever, watch TV, read a book, do whatever you want to do. Go out with your friends, go out to a restaurant, have lunch with them. Have a family game night. You can do so many things because you have a allotted time for all your tasks. So pretend, even if, when I say that you shouldn't procrastinate, that doesn't mean that you should always be working, right? Definitely not. That means break your tasks and know that you have to do certain things every day, like a quota, right? And once you finish that, your portion of work for the day, you are free and you can do whatever you want to do, right? So if you have this big exam, as long as you've covered chapters 1 and 2 in these 2 days, you're good to go. You can do whatever you want to do. As long as the next day, you do the task for that next day, which means you're covering chapter 2 or whatever. So as long as you fulfilled your work for the day, you can just relax and you can just have a really calm mind, because you know that you have a plan and that the next day you will stick to the plan, and the day after that, and you will finish your work on time because you have a plan and you're going to stick to it. So that's very, very helpful. It helps me a lot when I have some task that's too big, or I have a lot of things at the same time. Most of us have a lot of tasks at the same time, right? It's not that we have one task after the other, right? It's not that 1 week we have an essay, then an exam, then a project. It's like more likely than not, we have all those things due at the same time. So breaking it down and doing like these things at the same time is something that's really, really great. Break it down, make things into small tasks, maybe chip away, study a little for your exam, and then do one portion of your project, and then write a little bit of your essay, and then just, or break it apart, or maybe just 2 days do your essay, then 2 days do your project, whatever works for you. Whether you want to do it all in bit by bit little pieces every single day, or you want to allot certain days for certain things, just make sure that you're not doing things completely at the last minute, and make sure you're always looking ahead at what's to come, and you're planning ahead, and you're using today to help for a better tomorrow. Because honestly, there's so many times where just because we have free time, we take advantage of that, and we have like a whole week of that's not that busy, but then the week after that we're so overwhelmed. So we could have prevented that. We could have prevented that stress if we just looked and we noticed we had all those things to do next week, and we did just a few of those things in the previous week when we had the time to do so. And lastly, learn to say no. So I know a lot of times whenever people ask us for help, or they're like, oh, hey, can you take part in this event? Can you volunteer for this event? Let's go out together to eat? You have to know your boundaries. You have to know that you have to know what you yourself are able to handle and able to really, tackle all at the same time. You should know what you're able to manage. Actually, that's a good way of saying it, because if you don't know what you can manage, then you will just say yes to everything, and you will become overwhelmed. And I've noticed that this is something that in the past I've struggled with. Like whenever someone needs help, like they need volunteers, they need this, they need that, I always say yes. Like, you give me a date and a time, I'll be there, right? And it kind of took a toll on my on my health because I was so stressed all the time. I couldn't like possibly balance all these things with my work, with my school, with all these other responsibilities that I had. So you have to learn, like, obviously don't say no to everything, but you have to know like at what point you have reached your capacity, and maybe tell them, hey, like I would love to like you go out and have lunch with my friends. I would love to, take a day off and do this. I would love to, go on that little vacation, or like I'd love to volunteer for that one thing, but I have a lot of work and maybe next time I can do it, right? Just be honest and, never, take more than you can handle. Never put more on your plate, because if you put too many things on your plate, everything will fall apart, because you cannot possibly take care of the things that are important. So you will just disregard everything because you're just too overwhelmed, and you won't have any incentive to work on your things, because you'll just be too stressed all the time. So make sure that you have enough on your plate that you can handle, and the moment you realize that your plate of things, of tasks, of life responsibilities is getting too full, learn to cut some things off. And we can always cut some things off. I know we love a lot of things, we want to include everything in our life, but sometimes temporarily we have to prioritize the things that are important. For example, right now, like if this is the hardest semester for you in college, you might have to maybe join less organizations or go out with friends a little less, right? Or maybe if your family's going on vacation, maybe you go with them, but maybe just bring some study materials along with you, right? Just there are things you have to do to make sure that you are really successful in your own things, and learn to say no when you know that you cannot do those things whatsoever. And then lastly, to end, I want to talk about the benefits of not procrastinating. I already mentioned a lot of them. You will always be ahead in life. You will be successful. You will finish your tasks, so you will have time to add more things. Like, for example, instead of just like I'll use the example of the exam again. If you have an exam and you study last minute, you will just do the bare minimum and then you'll just go and take the test. But if you studied beforehand, you will have like a whole extra day to review, to like really look at the concepts that you don't understand, to go and ask questions, to go and understand things to the fullest extent, and then you will be able to exceed your own expectations and your own abilities, because you have tackled what you have to tackle, and you can go above and beyond, and you can take the extra step, take the extra mile to be even more successful if you want to be, right? But if you just want to complete your tasks and be done with it, that's fine. But if you're someone who's always driving yourself to succeed and pushing yourself forward to being the next best version of yourself, then if you procrastinate, it's going to hold you back. But if you don't procrastinate, if you always take care of your things on time, you can always you'll have time and you'll have the energy to do more things. And once you adopt that lifestyle of not procrastinating, it's going to help with so many other things. You're just going to have a better routine. You're just going to feel happier and healthier in so many ways, and you won't be stressed all the time. Another benefit of not procrastinating is that you won't be stressed, because like I mentioned, even if you are procrastinating, you're watching TV or something, at the back of your mind, you're still very stressed. Even if you don't realize it, you're stressed because you have all these tasks to do and you don't have a plan of how you're going to accomplish them. But if you at least make a plan, and if you stick to that plan or to that routine, and you chip off those certain tasks day by day, and you check those off bit by bit, then it become much better. So that's just one advice that I wanted to give. Even if a task is very big, break it down into little tasks that are much more doable than the big task alone, right? Because if someone just says, okay, study for the exam, you're going to be so confused. You're going to be like, okay, how do I study? But if you break it down and make little tasks, you're like, oh, okay, I can study this part today, this part tomorrow, this part the day after, review and ask questions the last day, things like that. And I'm just giving the example of an exam because it's something that I believe most of us have to do in our lives. I believe every single person who has ever been to school or college has to take exams. But even if you're not, I'm just giving the example of a student, but in your own life, whether you're a student or you're an employee, or even if you just stay at home, whatever you are doing, whatever task you have to do. And even if you have little tasks, just do them all at once. Make a list, what's most important, what's least important, and just start checking them off, and start from the most important thing. So that's just what I wanted to mention. That once you don't procrastinate, you will take control of your life and you will see the benefits, and just do what works best for you. It's trial and error. Maybe if you do some of these things that I mentioned, like keeping to a routine, proper scheduling, planning, learning to say no, maybe not all of these things will work for you, but just because a certain method doesn't work doesn't mean that you should give up. Obviously, keep trying until something works for you, and never be afraid to ask for help, and never be afraid to say no when you know that you have too much and you're getting overwhelmed. So with that being said, I just want to conclude this program by saying that respect your parents, like we mentioned in the beginning. Respect them, fulfill your rights, and educate yourself about what your parents' rights are, and always know that they love you and they have their best interest for you. And also, when it comes to your life's priorities, be able to prioritize the right things in your life, and you will see the benefits, in every aspect that you can possibly imagine. And inshallah, we will all take the appropriate steps to respect our parents more and to take care of the proper things in our life and to prioritize for the right things so that we can be more successful and so that we can become the best version of ourselves, and we can constantly improve, because Islamically, improving is something that's very, very important, and Islam also encourages and recommends us to improve every single day, and this is something that we can do to help improve ourselves. So with that being said, thank you so much for watching this segment of Youth Perspectives, and inshallah we will see you next time. Thank you.